I just tried to start this and it shut off. So hopefully I have enough memory and that doesn't happen. Um, so today is a little bit different for this series, but I'm gonna try to make it as authentic as possible. So I am in a hmm I am in a graduate class right now that's all about literacy. And so I have an assignment as part of that class to um, make some sort of share out that reflects new literacy, 21st century literacy. And it has occurred to me through that course that this whole endeavor of morning pages and what this series is a form of new literacy. I think I've been kind of explaining it in a way that is pretty clearly about me having a new way of processing and understanding new media. Um, so it just feels fitting that I would use this format to reflect on the course and what I've learned about literacy, and also talk a little bit about the assignment that I'm going to submit, which strangely feels more vulnerable than it probably should because it's not a super vulnerable topic, but um, I just feel like it's a little bit personal, I guess. Um, so new media is, it's funny how through the framework of school and being in a class with others where you can talk about ideas, terms that maybe you'd known, you kind of feel like you can get some ownership over. So, um, new media is a term that I think has been missing from a lot of my dialogue on this channel about the ideas that I've explored, specifically um, our digital lives and how our digital lives have changed us. I think new media is the term to describe this space, Substack, excuse me, vlogging, vlogs, TikTok, Instagram, especially video format. That is all new media. Podcasts are considered new media. So, and memes I would say are considered new media. So anything that kind of diverges from standard formats like books, newspaper, television, and movies is how I would probably define it. And the thought and the premise is that with the development of new forms of media, new forms of literacy are required. And in a really beautiful way, especially when you think about teaching young people and bringing up this next generation, which is another topic I think I've reflected on here a lot, it kind of validates and justifies um, the approach that teachers are taking to um, teaching children. So there's the whole running, not a joke, but kind of like this running topic of kids don't read anymore, kids don't know how to read anymore, and we're gonna have a bunch of like illiterate adults. And so this topic, this course, and this conversation in this video is about um, is about I'm having an intruder into this conversation. Is about kind of looking at that more critically and saying, well, literacy hasn't always just been about the written word. I think that's typically how we think of it, but really if you think about critical thinking and knowledge for a lot of human history, it was pre-written word knowledge, oral history, oral transmission of knowledge is a huge way that um, knowledgeable, literate citizen members were formed into society. And I also think that there's something to be said about evolving how knowledge is developed, managed, communicated. Um, so now I lost my thought because of my intruder, but yeah. So back to kind of this project of morning pages in this space, I think as we consume more information digitally and especially in short snippets of video, I think that I feel a need to process that in a new format and process that in a space like this that is fluid and is in a video that I can kind of look back on. And I'm just curious about what it's going to mean for young people being raised in this society to engage critically with the constant slew of information that they receive and be able to process it in a meaningful way. When you see children wanting to make TikTok videos, short videos, I think that is their way of being resilient and engaging with the world around them and what they're receiving from adults. And to think that a young, tiny human wouldn't reflect back a way of processing in the way that they're receiving it feels very narrow-minded and also unfair. So that's a bit of a spiel about literacy and new media, which is a huge part of what this course is about. This course that I've been taking, which is 21st century literacy. The other part of this course that has been a big cornerstone, actually in most of this degree, it's been a big cornerstone, is AI and how we work with AI, how we think with AI, and what that means. I think you could argue that AI is a form of new media. I think it's probably more than that. It's new intelligence, and it's a new intelligence for us primarily, and what it means to be good custodians of this new technology, what it means to grow with and develop with something that we're all just learning. And as I am in this class with educators, I don't necessarily know if I would consider myself an educator, but I am in a course with educators because the topic is learning and education. It feels like a huge piece that AI requires from users, and what it sort of pushes the human experience toward is greater collective awareness, greater collaboration when we're doing it right. Greater collective awareness, greater collaboration, and especially it forces kind of like this self-reflection and self-awareness, because in order to use a tool like a generative AI assistant effectively, you need to be very able to think critically about what you know what you know, and also critically about what you might be wrong about, what you need to learn, along with a responsibility to not be entirely in your own bubble with the tool that you're using. So there's a lot that's interesting there. And by the end of the course, the concept that came to mind there's always that fun moment when you think that you are the person who has discovered this idea, and you have that moment of, has anyone else ever thought of this term or this idea? Because I think I just came up with it entirely on my own, and then you realize pretty quickly that that's not the case. So I came across this idea of self-literacy, which I learned is a topic that a lot of people have formed and come to. And I think it's a really beautiful concept. And I think that this exercise of morning pages and any form of reflection, meditation, along with the reflection that we share with others, so meditation maybe being something that's more singular and isolated, and the ways that we can participate in self-reflection, self-introspection, and self-growth with others in community is all part of what I would call self-literacy and kind of building up the muscle. I think it's different from I think it differs from ideas like self-management and emotional intelligence and all these different facets that make up our ability to practice self-literacy. But I think it really is kind of all of those things combined, and knowing yourself, and also what are concrete tools that we use. I would say journaling is probably an example of self-literacy. Um, and yeah, just the endeavor to understand yourself better and really think critically about your internal world, which is something I clearly love to do because that is a huge part of this effort on this channel. So that was a very cool way to wrap up my learning in the course and kind of come to a nice mini bow, a nice like starter crystallization of all of these different pieces and what they mean, and also have a lot of faith in how the trend that's happening in education and rearing children that is a lot more focused on a person's ability to know themselves, develop, grow, and work with others, and yeah. Uh, so for my assignment for this course, I think it's probably worth mentioning here too, and I think also as part of the remit for the assignment that I'm hoping this will kind of fit nicely into as well, excuse me, is a tool that I came up with for myself a little while ago now when I was in a more challenging part of my life, that has come up again recently, and it's come up over the years as something that I've just shared with others about how it may or may not be helpful for them. And it is really pretty crazy, but it really helped me. I was someone who, for all of my life until I was like about 30, yeah, pretty much 30, I had never done any long-term planning, really. I had always kind of had like, maybe I'd like that, maybe I'd want to do that, or sort of just nebulous ideas about what I really envisioned for my life or wanted for my life or where I saw myself in the future. And that ability to envision myself in the future was not something I really did for a lot of reasons. I think I preferred to live in the moment. I preferred to kind of take things as they come, day by day, not plan too much. And I also think it was maybe a combination of I was experiencing depression, and so I didn't want to envision myself in the future. And then that sort of became whatever that snake thing is that I always forget, the snake eating itself. Well, I haven't created a vision or a path or a plan for myself in the future, so now I feel more depressed because I can't envision that. So it kind of became this self-fulfilling feedback loop, prophecy, whatever you want to say. So when I turned 30, pretty unsurprisingly, I kind of felt like I'd stumbled into my life and that I had done, good reflection and made choices, but I had never really like put real planning toward where I saw my life going and what I saw for myself. And I had a relative very succinctly in a very short conversation, as a lot of powerful conversations often are, told me that I had to make a 5-year plan. And in my mind, I was just like, that's the stupidest thing ever. Who makes 5-year plans? Nerds. And what am I going to do with a 5-year plan? I don't want to have to do that. And my relative was basically like, you need to make a 5-year plan, not because you need to fulfill your 5-year plan, but because you need to know what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and you need to know kind of what you're moving toward. And it's okay if the plan changes. It's okay if it's not exactly what you imagine, but at least then you know kind of what your values are and what you're charting toward. So I took that, and like I said, at that time, I was going through a very challenging period and kind of didn't know. I was willing to take any form of advice to kind of get me out of that headspace that felt very trapped or locked into I didn't even know what. So I was willing to take kind of any advice to get me out of that mindset. And I just sat down with my computer one day. I can't remember if I was in a cafe or if I was at home. I just sat down with my computer. I had nowhere else to be, nothing else, nowhere else for days. Really had nothing in front of me, which is kind of wild to think about. It doesn't happen very often. And I sort of just, I started with this idea of a life taxonomy. So basically thinking about all of the parts of my life that I could reflect on. And I wrote down all of those categories, and then I did kind of like a state of the union of how I felt about all of them, how I'd gotten to the point that I'd been at, what were resounding successes that I could think of that at that time, what were things that I didn't love that I wanted to change, and I sort of just did what I called a life audit. And I completely looked at all the parts of my life, and I really looked myself in the face and kind of said, what is this thing? What is working for me? What do I feel proud of? What do I think I can really claim as a success? And what am I not happy with? And what do I feel like was, if I could go back and do it over, or if I'm looking forward into the next 5 years, what would I change? And when I tell people that, I get mixed reactions. I think a lot of the time people are kind of like, whoa, what does that even mean? Or that sounds really intense. And it was very intense, but it was also really, really helpful. And I'm sure at some point else in my life I will probably do it again, but hopefully I don't reach a point where I feel like I'm at like such a desolate impasse that I need to do something like an overhaul like that. I haven't done one since. And then I just really started thinking about, from that, what was working well, what could I really rest on as a success, and know also that, I didn't come to where I was accidentally. Your life, I always think of what a therapist told me, that whatever decision you make is the right one because it's the one you made at the time. And that is kind of radical, especially when you think about people who have made what some might call really bad choices that bring them to rock bottom, or whatever you might say. But I think that that's rooted in radical acceptance, which is a really powerful form of therapy, and is also a really powerful premise to live our lives with, that we can't always know that we're making the right decision. We can only really go on faith. So looking at what I could rest on as really good things and what I wanted to change, I started thinking about what I wanted to accomplish in the next 2 years. 5 years I couldn't wrap my head around, but like, what if I could look at the next 2 years and say, this is what I've done, what would that look like? And then from there, and across that taxonomy of life that I made, so friends, family, relationship, work, finances, learning was a category, creative was a category. I can think of other ones, I'm sure. Health and wellness was a big one. And like, across all of those, if I were tracking how I wanted to be tracking my life, what would that look like? And then I eventually kind of made it to what 5 years would look like. And the relief that I felt after completing that exercise was massive. I felt like I was able to move on with my life and accept the decisions I had made up to that point to get to where I was, which was where it was, and had good things and had bad things, etc. And yeah, I felt a tremendous amount of relief. I felt this huge opening and clearing to then accept where I was and move forward in the best way that I knew how, with what I had, to build the life that I envisioned for myself. And whenever I talk to people I care about, or friends who are struggling with, making decisions about what they want to do going forward, or feeling kind of stuck, maybe not always, but if it feels appropriate, I'll mention it. And every now and then I offer to send a template, and I've started kind of making a template of it, or an exercise of it. And I don't know how helpful that will be for people, but I think for me, because it comes up multiple times and it was such a huge tool that I created for myself that really moved me out of a place of despair and feeling like I didn't have control over my life, to feeling like I had all this space created and that I had agency over my path. I really want that to be a tool that I can offer to others. And I think it is a really good example of self-literacy, which is a huge takeaway that came from this course that I'm in. And yeah, I hope that this assignment and this video is a way that I can kind of put that small piece that I've started making into a product that someone else could use, or maybe help them in the way that it helped me, that that this will allow me to do that. And I think that this video and the format of this has really helped me to process that, to now be able to kind of make it into a thing. So it's a nice way that all these pieces are coming together. And if that Excel or sheet or Google Sheet or whatever makes it into some format that is helpful, or that feels like it could be used and shared more publicly, I'll link it to this video and I'll put it linked somewhere in my Substack so that other people can use it, have it, if it's helpful, or just look at it and be like, wow, what a crazy lady. That's crazy. And they can laugh at it or think it's nuts, because it kind of is. So yeah, so that's the topic for this. A bit longer because, like I said, it's part of this final assignment for this literacy class I'm in. And I will try to remember to keep making these, because I enjoy it and it helps me to process life. And yeah, goodbye.